So 2025 is a very interesting year for politics within the Caribbean. We see a lot of islands within the Caribbean going into election for 2025. And earlier on this year, we saw Trinidad and Tobago election, and we saw the incumbent government lost. We saw the PNM government lost the election to the UNC party. And now in Trinidad and Tobago, we have a new prime minister in Kamala Persad-Possessor. And what is interesting is that we have 3 elections that's scheduled for around September coming up this year. And that is with Guyana, Jamaica, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And in my opinion, 2 of these elections are going to be very critical, especially for CARICOM going forward. So Guyana, Jamaica, 2 of the elections that I'm looking out for the most, because these 2 elections will shape the future of CARICOM going forward. And that is my personal opinion. So right now, I'm just setting the stage for these 3 elections coming up later this year. And what is interesting about these elections and what I'll be looking forward to is the incumbent government. So all of the leaders that are listed, they are the incumbent government for these islands. And when you look at what happened in Trinidad and Tobago, and you saw that Dr. Keith Rowley, he lost as an incumbent government. And when you look at all the election that's happening in 2025, or the ones that I'm focusing on right now, Trinidad was interested because with Trinidad and Dr. Keith Rowley, Trinidad was in a decline. Trinidad is coming from being one of the most developed, or the first Caribbean island to experience certain development. They were way ahead. Trinidad and Tobago, they were way ahead of most of the other Caribbean islands. So in terms of the glory days in Trinidad and Tobago, we saw last year Trinidad and Tobago took a big hit. At the end of last year, we saw the state of emergency. We saw the foreign exchange crisis. And that was something that was very difficult for Dr. Keith Rowley to overcome. So as I stated in other videos, there was no surprise. To me, there was no surprise that he lost, because it is very difficult for an incumbent government to win an election when the country is on a decline. But what is going to be interesting to look out for with these elections, the difference between Trinidad and Tobago and what we see going on in these 3 elections that is coming up, is that these government, the incumbent governments for these islands, can definitely say, like, look, we are on the up and up. First of all, Guyana. Guyana is the fastest growing economy in the entire world. The fastest growing economy in the entire world. I've spoken about it on numerous occasions, but that is the reality. Guyana is booming right now. And Jamaica is dubbed the comeback kid. Jamaica from 14, 15 years ago, on the verge of collapse in terms of 144% debt to GDP ratio, which is something that pretty much countries don't survive that type of ratio. But Jamaica, the current administration managed to pull it off, and now they're at 64% debt to GDP ratio, and they're dubbed the comeback kid. And then we look at St. Vincent and the Grenadines with Ralph Gonzalez, who could brag about the airport, the new Sandals Hotel, Four Seasons Hotel. There are quite a few projects going on in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So unlike Trinidad, Guyana, Jamaica, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, they would brag that, look, their best days are ahead of them and they are doing better today than probably any time since independence. So that is the difference. So it's going to be very interesting to see if these 3 incumbent government with their individual countries doing very well. And as I said, Guyana, this is the best Guyana I've been ever. Before independence, after independence, this is the best. And arguably Jamaica is the same. This is the best economy that Jamaica would have seen, with a low unemployment rate and with a construction boom going on in Jamaica. And as I said, St. Vincent and the Grenadines can brag about the tourism industry. Last year, they eclipsed like over 100,000 visitors for the first time I think, in their history. So it's going to be very interesting to see what is going to happen with these islands. So first of all, let's take a look at Guyana. Okay, let's take a look at Guyana. In my opinion, I believe that this election coming up later this year in Guyana would have to be the most important election of any of the islands that are represented in CARICOM. And the reason why I say that is because for the past 4 to 5 years, Guyana have been leading the world in terms of their GDP, in terms of their debt to GDP ratio. And Guyana economy have been booming for the past 4 to 5 years. And any disruption in government could be catastrophic for CARICOM because what we see going on in Guyana now in terms of the Exxon deal, it is amazing. And when you look at the development that is taking place in Guyana in terms of the construction that is taking place of schools, hospitals, the highway to Brazil, and the fact that Guyana is projected to be the breadbasket for CARICOM in terms of getting CARICOM food security secure. So I believe that this is going to be a very, very important election. And let's take a look at what happened the last election and what we can expect for election 2025. As you can see, it is 65 seats and there's 33 seats to hold a majority government. So as you can see here, it was a very, very narrow victory for the People's Progressive Party and President Ali just winning out the other party by 33 to 31. So that is very important to note. It was a pandemic election. However, the turnout was good because it was over 70% turnout, voter turnout. So that was good, but it was a very, very narrow victory. And with what is going on in the region right now, in terms of the Essequibo region and the conflict going on between Guyana and Venezuela, it is going to be very, very interesting to see how this election turns out. And oftentimes, when the incumbent government, when the country is doing well, the incumbent government would normally regain their footing in government. So it's going to be very interesting to see all the things that's going on in Venezuela, the development that's been taking place. As I said, I think President Ali would have enjoyed a good 5 years because for the entire 5 years that he's been in office, Guyana has been on the up and up, the fastest growing economy in the entire world for the entire time that he's been there. And I know people will say that, look, this is not his doing because everything was set in motion before he took office. But it is going to be very interesting to see what is going to happen. And as I said, with Guyana and the oil and natural gas and the ability now to have the cheapest in terms of manufacturing in the CARICOM region, this is going to be very important that Guyana stays course for the next 20 to 30 years. And that's why I say that this would be the most important election for 2025 because we see sometimes when countries that they're progressing and any disruption, what could happen. We see what happened in Venezuela after Chavez died and the country just went down. So this is going to be very important. And this is the one that I'm watching out for more than any of the other election for 2025. Okay, so that is Guyana. And I know every time we have the conversation about Guyana, a part of CARICOM, and mention Guyana as a Caribbean, I know people, sometimes they will leave in the comment section, we're not a Caribbean island. I know, but Guyana identify as Caribbean culture, Caribbean everything. So that's why we put Guyana in the mix. But yes, Guyana is doing very well. And it is going to be very interesting to see if President Ali, if he can win another election, seeing that Guyana is doing so well in their development. As I said, being like the fastest growing economy in the world, I think 4 years straight now. So that is going to be very interesting to see their election come September, what is going to happen. Because one thing for sure is that we don't know. We know that with Guyana, they have like a relationship with America. I know it seemed like they are working well with the Trump administration. We don't know if this administration lose the election, the next administration, what type of problem is there going to be with working with Donald Trump. So that is going to be very interesting. So as I said, this election to me is the most important election, especially for CARICOM, because Guyana is the CARICOM head office is in Guyana. Guyana has more land, available land, than any other countries in the region. And the plan that CARICOM has for Guyana in terms of becoming the breadbasket for all CARICOM island nation. So it is going to be interesting to see what happened come September. Next, let's take a look at Jamaica. So let's take a look at Jamaica now. So Jamaica now, in my opinion, this election is the second most important election for 2025. And like Guyana, Jamaica have been enjoying a lot of success since the last election in 2020. And they recorded like some of the best comeback out of the pandemic in terms of tourism in the entire world. So they have been enjoying a lot of success under this administration, and we see a lot of development going on in Jamaica. However, the last election, the turnout was very low. The voter turnout was very low, and the JLP like swept the floor with the PMP. So as you can see, the seat count is not even close. They got like a total beatdown from the Jamaica Labour Party. So when you look at the seat count, it's 49 to 14. And as I said, this was like a beatdown. And this is not, I don't think this one is expected to be as competitive as I would expect what happened in Guyana, because as I said, Guyana was a very narrow victory the last election. Apparently, like there was a recall the last election also, and they did not decide government until weeks after. So that's how close the Guyana election was. Jamaica, however, was a complete beatdown. So they were able to call their election the same day, early in the night, that same election day, because it wasn't even close. So it is going to be very interesting this one is going to be very hard to predict, because as I said, the turnout was very low. So we don't know like if a lot of the PMP voters just did not turn out because of what was happening in the pandemic, but they were completely beat down. So it is going to be very interesting. And I don't know, like I don't think many people are expecting the PMP to win this election because of the victory that they would have to have. They would have to have like an historic victory in order to win this election. I think the best that most people can see for the PMP is for them to pick up more seats. Like if they pick up, say, 10, 12 more seats, that would be considered a victory instead of 14 seats. Like if they can come out with 25 or 20 seats, then probably they would see that as a victory. But it is going to be very, very hard to come back from that beatdown that they experienced in 2020. But this is definitely an election to watch for this year. Yes, so that's Jamaica. And Jamaica is very interesting because what we see happening in Jamaica right now is that the Prime Minister, Andrew Holness, right now is arguable. I think a lot of people would agree that if you measure success based on the term that a Prime Minister would do and the amount of achievement, people would argue that the Prime Minister is the most successful Prime Minister in Jamaica's history. And that's an argument that people could have now. And they could say between him and PJ Patterson in terms of the length of time, because I think PJ Patterson was there for about 14 to 15 years. Andrew Holness is heading into that direction. And if he wins this election, undoubtedly, he would be the most successful Prime Minister in the history of Jamaica. And this one is very tough because the Jamaica Labour Party, they swept the election the last time. And I know people are still saying that because the voter turnout was low, but this one, it would take a miracle for the People's National Party to win an election. This is like being in a basketball game and you have like 60 seconds on the clock and you are down like 20. that's how bad it is, because the People's National Party got completely wiped out the last election. And as I said, it's going to take a miracle for them to win back that much seat to take government. So this one is going to be very interesting, and I'm here for it. And I can't wait to see what happened. I don't know, September or October, whenever Andrew Holness decide to call the election. But that is Jamaica. Let's take a look at St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, another interested election coming up for this year. And what does this mean for the region? Well, Ralph Gonzal of the United Labour Party is the longest serving prime minister in the entire Caribbean. And I think that apart from Fidel Castro, he would have been the longest serving leader, especially if winning the next election. And that's the goal for Ralph. He's trying to win another election. However, this one was a very, very narrow election also. There's not much seat in St. Vincent and the Grenadines as when you compare to the 65 in Guyana and the 63 in Jamaica. But this was very close, and this is an election that people are watching for different reasons than I would say Guyana and Jamaica. I think a lot of people are concerned about another victory for Ralph Gonzalez. And words in the street is that people are also concerned that the prime minister is trying to keep it in the family. So this election is going to be very interesting. Ralph Gonzalez is a student of politics, and he is someone that knows how to win an election. He is considered as like a elder statesman in the Caribbean. And this one, as I said, this one is going to be very interesting. A lot of people are looking out for this one in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And what would this mean for the region if Ralph Gonzalez would secure another election, further making him the longest serving prime minister in the history of the Caribbean? So this is a very interesting one that people are looking out for. Okay, so that's St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The thing is, St. Vincent and the Grenadines is not the powerhouse that Guyana and Jamaica is in terms of CARICOM. But what St. Vincent has to offer, with especially Ralph Gonzalez, as I said, like he's the like a elder statesman in the Caribbean. Like he's someone that we saw when what was going on between Guyana and Venezuela. We saw that Ralph Gonzalez was the one that went over to Venezuela to kind of smooth things over. So like he's been in politics longer than anybody in the region. So he's like a elder statesman. And that is what he has over some of the other leaders. And I guess he could say, like, as stated earlier, St. Vincent with the airport, it's not new anymore, but the international airport, and we are seeing like a lot more flights going into St. Vincent and the Grenadines from Canada, from America, all over the states, like whether it's Miami, whether it's New York, LA, lots more flights going into St. Vincent and the Grenadines, like tourism, record high in terms of tourism. So Ralph Gonzalez is going to claim that, look, this is the most successful St. Vincent and the Grenadines has been in its history, especially within tourism. But as stated, the last election was like a tiny win for Ralph Gonzalez. So is he going to be able to hold on for much longer? Because people are saying that, look, this man is, I think, the oldest prime minister in the Caribbean, I think between him and Kamala Processor, but he's holding on. And one of the things that people, as I stated earlier, people are concerned about is that there are rumors that Ralph wants to keep it in his family. So I believe that if he's going to lose, that would be the thing, because people do not want him to hand it over to his son. So those are the three elections that should be coming up by September. And I will bring more on those elections, the results, and everything excited or whatever comes out of this election. I'm here for it. So guys, sound off in the comment section and let me know your thoughts. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing content. And remember, peace. I'm out.